Hello, and welcome to Unit 5A, Part 2. So, today we're going to continue with the strategy of finding like denominators for multiple fractions. In the last video, you focused just on the concept. What does it mean that I can express two fractions using the same denominator? And now I want to teach you the strategy for finding what denominator to use. So we are going to use a strategy to find here the simplest way to find like denominators is by using the LCM. LCM, you'll hear that term a lot. We use this abbreviation because it stands for least common multiple. And that's just a long thing to say, and it's faster to say LCM. But we really need to know what we mean when we say LCM. The big idea is we are looking for the least common multiple. So let's look at each piece of this term to really understand what it means. Least just means smallest. Common means that they're the same. And a multiple would be like if you had multiples of 5, you could say 5, 10, 15. It's basically a number that can be created by multiplying your starting number by other whole numbers. So when we try to find the least common multiple, we're looking for the number that's the smallest that they have in common. To find the LCM, or least common multiple, you're going to list all the multiples of each denominator and look for the smallest multiple that is in both lists. Let me show you what I mean. So for example, I'm going to come down here where it says rewrite 3/4 and 1/3 as equivalent fractions with like denominators. In other words, I have to find a way to write 3/4 and 1/3 using the same denominator. Our first step, step 1, is going to be to find the LCM, find the least common multiple. To do that, we wrote 4, because that's our denominator for the first fraction, and 3, that's the denominator for the second fraction. And then we just started listing the multiples. So we have 4, 8, 12, and we could keep going. 16, 20, 24, and you could go on and on. Here I have 3, that's the denominator for 1/3, and we started listing the multiples. 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, and again, we could just keep on going. 18, 21. You could literally continue listing multiples for the end of time. Now, I don't recommend you do that, but I'm just saying that so that you know there could be an endless list of multiples. Now that I have my two lists, here's a list of the multiples of 4, here's a list of the multiples of 3. I'm looking for multiples they have in common. So for example, looking at these lists, I can see 12 is on both lists. And if I kept going here, 21, the next one would be 24, I could see 24 would be on both lists. I found common multiples. So in 4, 12 is a multiple of 4, but it's also a multiple of 3. And 24 is a multiple of 4, but it's also 24 is a multiple of 3. These are common multiples. Now the most important part is I want to find the least common multiple, the one that's the smallest. And since 12 is a common multiple and 24 is a common multiple, the least common multiple is that 12. So first I'm going to find the LCM. So for these two numbers, the LCM is 12. Once I do that, I'm ready to do step number 2, which is multiply the fractions to create equivalent fractions. Basically, whatever my LCM is, that's what's going to be my equivalent denominator. So since the least common multiple is 12, I know I can turn my 3/4 into 12ths and my 1/3 into 12ths. I can write them with like denominators. To do this, I'm just going to use the skill that you worked on in lesson 4, where you're finding equivalent fractions. So for my 4, I think, what could I multiply that by to turn it into 12? Well, I could multiply it by 3. Whatever I do to my denominator, I will do the same thing to my numerator. 3 times 3 equals 9. So 3/4 can be rewritten as 9/12. I can come over here and do the same thing to the other fraction, 1/3. 3, I could multiply that by 4, and that turns it into 12. And I can do the same thing over here. 1 times 4 is 4. So 1/3 is equal to 4/12. So if I was going to rewrite 3/4 and 1/3 as equivalent fractions, I could just say 3/4 and 1/3 equal 9/12 and 4/12. I took my starting fractions and I rewrote them as equivalent fractions with like denominators. 3/4 is equivalent to 9/12. 1/3 is equivalent to 4/12. Now let's try some together. If you're feeling really confident, you're welcome to just try these on your own. If you're not feeling really confident yet, let me get that out of the way. You're welcome to just work with me and we can work together, and then you can pause when you feel confident to work independently. So for this first one, we're trying to do 1/8 and 3/4, and we're trying to figure out what two equivalent fractions we could write them as with common denominators. So our first step was to look at eighths and fourths, and we need to find the least common multiple, the LCM. So let's start with writing out our denominator numbers, and we're going to list multiples. 8, 16, 24, 32. I usually list only 3 or 4, and then I go back and add more only if I need them. And now I can do the same thing for 4. 4, 8, 12, 16. Finally, I'm looking for which one do they have in common. They get both 8. They both can make 16, but I want the least common multiple. In this case, it's 8. So to turn 1/8 into eighths, I don't have to do anything. It's already an eighths. To turn 3/4 into eighths, I know 4 times 2 gives me 8. So whatever I do to the top, I can do to the bottom. 3 times 2 is 6. So I can rewrite 1/8 and 3/4 as 1/8 and 6/8. I didn't change the value of my fractions, I just rewrote them in a way that uses the same denominator for both. All right, let's check the next one. We need to find equivalent fractions with common denominators for 3/4 and 7/10. Let's start by finding the least common multiple. We need to find the least common multiple of 4 and 10. I can list 4, 8, 12, 16, and I can list 10, 20, 30, 40. Now looking at these, I can look for a common multiple. Oh no, I don't see one that they have in common. So when I don't see one they have in common, I can just keep listing multiples. Aha, there we go. They both have 20 in their list of multiples. That's a common multiple, and it's also the smallest one that they have. So I know I'm going to convert them to fractions with a denominator of 20. So 3/4 I want to rewrite as 20ths. To turn 4 into 20, I have to multiply by 5. So to turn 3 into my new numerator, I also have to multiply by 5. 3 times 5 is 15. And now 7/10, and I want to write that one as 20ths. To turn tenths into 20ths, I have to multiply by 2. So I'm going to do the same thing with my numerator, and I'll get 14 20ths. I can rewrite 3/4 and 7/10 as 15 20ths and 14 20ths. Now they're equivalent fractions with common denominators. Let's try one more. I need to write 1/4 and 5/6 as equivalent fractions with common denominators. I'm going to start by finding the LCM of 4 and 6. 4, 8, 12. Ooh, I'm going to stop there. I know I can make 12 using 6, so I think that's probably going to be my common multiple. 6, 12. Yep, got it. So I'm going to turn these into fractions with a denominator of 12. 1/4 equals 12ths. 4 times 3 is 12. So I'm going to multiply 1 times 3 to get my new numerator. And I'll do the same thing with 5/6. I want to turn 5/6 into 12ths. 6 times 2 is 12. So 5 times 2 is 10. So 1/4 I can rewrite as 3/12.